I was the kind of wife people admired, faithful, loving, present. But behind every smile, I was hiding a dark, consuming addiction. The day my husband discovered it, everything shattered. If you've ever lived a life where your smile hides your shame, subscribe now and drop in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Rebeca. I'm 36 years old. I've been married to Daniel for 12 years, a man who's everything you could ask for in a husband. Faithful, kind, present, a man of God on the outside, our life looked beautiful. I teach children at a Christian school. I lead women's groups at church. I bake for charity events. I even mentor young wives. Everyone around me thought I had the perfect marriage, the perfect calling, the perfect peace, but they didn't. See what happened behind the closed door of my mind? While others saw a role model, I was secretly battling an addiction that grew quietly, shamefully in the dark corners of my soul. It started small curiosity, boredom, a little escape, but it quickly turned into something I couldn't control. Late at night, alone, I would dive into explicit stories, images, videos that would ignite my thoughts and satisfy my craving only for the shame to return the second the screen went dark. I would delete my history, whisper prayers of repentance, and promise myself that this time would be the last. It never was. The worst part, I became good at hiding. I learned how to switch windows fast, how to fake being tired, how to avoid intimacy with my husband without raising suspicions. I became two women, the one everyone admired, and the one no one should ever meet. My addiction wasn't just about the images, it was about the emotional high, the control, the fantasy that made me feel powerful when I felt invisible. I convinced myself it was harmless, that I wasn't hurting anyone, that at least I wasn't cheating in the physical sense. But every time I looked at Daniel, his eyes, his heart, his gentleness, I knew I was betraying something sacred. I knew I was damaging a man who loved me with everything he had. There were nights I would cry silently beside him. I'd hold his hand and feel like a fraud. I'd pray with him and feel like a stranger. I was rotting inside, spiritually numb, emotionally split, and yet no one knew, until the day everything fell apart. But before that moment, I had lived in secret, for years broken, ashamed, and terrified of who I had become. This is my confession. This is the truth I've buried under the title of good wife. And I'm telling it because someone needs to know they're not alone in the dark. Someone needs to know that even those who wear halos in public can carry chains in private. And those chains, those secret addictions, will always find a way to break through. They did in my life. And when they did, the life I built began to fall like paper in the rain. I wish I could say that I sought help before things got worse, but I didn't. I lived in denial. I told myself stories about my stress, about my exhaustion, about how Daniel wouldn't understand, and the more I justified it, the deeper I sank. I'd sit at my desk during breaks and scroll through content I would be horrified to admit even existed. I'd listen to audios late at night, headphones in, smiling as if I were falling asleep to worship music when, in reality, I was feeding my addiction. There were days when I felt sick from guilt, physically ill from the weight of my deception. But somehow, I still woke up, dressed the kids, smiled at the neighbors, kissed Daniel goodbye like nothing was wrong. My life had become a performance. Every role I played, the teacher, the wife, the leader, was just a costume I wore over a wounded soul. And I began to notice how it changed me. I became impatient, cold, distant, not just with Daniel, but with myself. I couldn't feel joy anymore. I couldn't connect with God. My prayers felt like lies. My worship was hollow, and deep down, I began to fear that I had already crossed a line I couldn't come back from. It wasn't just about lust anymore. It was about escape, control, a place to hide when everything else felt like pressure. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw less and less of the woman Daniel fell in love with. I saw a stranger I created, a version of me that I fed in secret while starving the truth. I wanted out, but I didn't know how to ask. How do you confess a sin no one sees? How do you cry for help when you're the one digging your own grave? So I stayed quiet. I smiled wider. I clapped louder, and all the while I was dying inside, until the day I couldn't hide anymore. Looking back now, I realize how many warning signs I ignored. The irritability, the emotional detachment, the way I flinched when Daniel touched me, not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't feel worthy of his touch. I had replaced intimacy with secrecy, connection with control. I stopped letting him into my mind because it had become a battlefield, and I feared that if he ever walked through it, he wouldn't survive what he found. I lived in fear of exposure, fear of judgment, fear of losing the man who loved me more than I ever loved myself. But nothing was scarier than the truth, that I was already lost long before he knew, that I had betrayed our vows with fantasies, with clicks, with thoughts that whispered to me like sirens. And I listened. I followed. I let myself be led by Shame dressed as pleasure, and now I carry that truth not to excuse myself, but to finally live without masks. This is who I was, and this is where it broke me. It started on a quiet Tuesday night. Daniel had taken the kids to visit his mother, and I was home alone for a few hours, just me, my thoughts, and my phone. I wasn't looking for anything. At least, that's what I told myself. I was scrolling absent-mindedly, half watching a cooking video, half thinking about lesson plans for the next day. Then, in the suggestions below, I saw something. It wasn't pornographic. It wasn't even labeled as inappropriate. Just a thumbnail with a title that hinted at something sensual, something forbidden. I clicked. Just one click. Just one video. Just one night. The video wasn't explicit, but it awakened something in me. A curiosity, a craving, a shadow. The next day I searched for something similar. Then again, the day after. Then more. Deeper. Longer. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't affect my marriage, my faith, my integrity. But the truth? That night was the beginning of my fall. And the worst part is, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like floating. Floating away from reality, away from everything I loved, away from myself. I became addicted to stories that I'd never admit to anyone. I started imagining things during worship services at school, around Daniel. I looked at people and judged their purity while I lost mine in silence. It didn't happen overnight. That's what made it more dangerous. It crept in, quiet, polite, invisible. And when I finally noticed how deep I was, I couldn't find the way back. That click was my portal, a portal that opened ... and never closed again. I wish I could say it stopped at curiosity, but it didn't. It became a ritual, a quiet routine that only I knew about. Every night, once Daniel fell asleep beside me, I'd turn the screen brightness down, plug in my headphones, and dive into a world that both thrilled and disgusted me. I started with short videos, nothing too intense. But soon, they weren't. Enough. I needed more longer stories. Deeper fantasies. Secret forums where people shared things I couldn't even say out loud. And I wasn't just watching, I was engaging. I created fake profiles. I left comments. I imagined myself in those scenarios, and the worst part, I started craving those things more than I craved real intimacy with my husband. During the day, I was still Rebeca, smiling, praying, teaching, encouraging other women in the church. But at night, I was someone else entirely, a shadow version of me. I told myself I was just tired, that I deserved an escape, that it wasn't hurting anyone, but deep down, I knew. I was slipping away from who I used to be. Daniel would reach for me in bed and I'd tense up. I wasn't present. Our conversations got shorter. Our laughter faded. My mind was constantly replaying scenes I'd watched the night before, and my prayers, they became hollow. I'd whisper, to God, with my mouth, but my heart was still chasing images. I felt disgusting. I felt addicted, but I couldn't stop. Every time I promised myself this is the last time I'd end up back there again, searching, clicking, hiding. I began to choose the dark over the light because the light exposed me. I'd delete my browser history like a criminal hiding evidence. I started avoiding eye contact with Daniel. I feared he could see right through me. I hated the lies, but I hated the silence even more, and yet I kept choosing silence. I kept smiling through church services, nodding in prayer circles, giving advice to other wives, all while feeling like a fraud. The more I indulged, the more numb I became. What used to bring me shame now brought me comfort. That scared me, because if sin no longer hurts, you start to wonder if you're already lost. I didn't feel like Rebeca anymore. I was two people, and the one behind the screen was starting to win. I fantasized about people I worked with, strangers on the street, even people in church. It wasn't just about videos anymore. It was about control, escape, power. I needed those fantasies to feel alive. But every time I came back to reality, I felt emptier. My joy was gone. My self-worth was shattered. And still, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to destroy my marriage, but I was already destroying myself. And part of me believed that if Daniel ever found out, he'd never look at me the same again. I was afraid of him. I wasn't afraid of losing him. He wasn't supposed to see it. I had always been careful, always deleted, always locked, always cleaned up the trail of my double life. But that night, I left my phone on the couch, just for a moment, just enough for him to glance at the screen. The notification didn't lie. A name, a site, an icon I thought no one would ever recognize. But he clicked. And what he saw wasn't just betrayal, it was a map of my secret world. Files, links, saved stories, private conversations, bookmarks that exposed fantasies I never dared to speak out loud. I walked into the room and saw his face. He was sitting on the edge of the couch, his hands shaking, eyes flooded, holding the device like it was poison. Is this? What's been between us all this time? He asked. No anger, no yelling, just heartbreak. Like he was staring at a version of me. he never imagined could exist. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Everything inside me collapsed in silence. I had spent years pretending, smiling, kissing him goodnight while my heart was elsewhere, whispering prayers while fantasizing about other men, pretending purity while hiding filth in digital shadows. And now, in one moment, everything was on the table. He didn't ask how long, he didn't ask why, he just sat there shattered as if the woman he thought he knew had died and a stranger was now standing in front of him. My mouth opened, but there were no words strong enough to carry. The weight of that moment, just one sentence came out like a broken confession. I didn't know how to stop. His head dropped, his shoulders shook, and I realized this wasn't just the end of my secret, it might be the end of us. I reached out, but he didn't move. My touch didn't bring comfort anymore. It triggered disgust. His eyes finally met mine. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to scream because I was ashamed. I wanted to explain that it started as a way to cope with stress, loneliness, emotional distance, but all those excuses felt cheap now. The truth was I chose secrecy over intimacy, fantasy over reality, lust over love, and now I was paying the price. Every memory we built together felt contaminated. Every prayer we prayed as a couple now echoed hollow. And the worst part wasn't that he saw what I did. It was that he finally saw who I really was. I had broken the one person who trusted me with everything, and there was no undoing it, just the silence between us. Heavy, final, a silence louder than any scream. That's the night everything changed. That's the night I watched my husband fall out of love with me. Daniel didn't scream. He didn't leave the house, but something in him shut down. That night, he took a pillow and went to sleep in the guest room. No anger, no shouting, just silence. The kind of silence that screams more than any words. Over the next few days, he spoke very little. He started going to church alone, leaving earlier than usual, returning later. At the dinner table, he'd look at me but through me. I tried to talk, to explain, to justify. It wasn't physical. It started without me noticing. I still love you, but every word I said felt like another excuse. And he had no patience for excuses. One morning I found him reading the Bible, eyes red. I asked if he was okay. He said, "I'm trying to forgive you, but I don't even know who you are anymore." That broke me, because the truth was I didn't know either. I sat down. I told him everything, every lie, every click, every fantasy I created that didn't include him. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, not because I got caught, but because I finally saw what I had become. I told him I was sorry. I begged him to believe that I was still his, that I wanted to heal, that I wanted us. He didn't hug me. He didn't promise anything. He just sat there. And after a long silence, he said, "I still love you, but I need time. I need space. I need to learn how to trust again." And I nodded, because for once, I wasn't going to ask for shortcuts. I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't that bad. I was ready to face the ruins I had created brick by brick. I didn't want to hide anymore. That was the first truth I embraced. I didn't want to be a wife with secrets, a woman of God with double standards, or a mother who teaches purity while drowning in shame. So I did what terrified me. I spoke out loud, first to my therapist, then to my church mentor, then to a support group where everyone had a story like mine. And I said it, trembling. I'm addicted. 3 words that shattered the silence I lived in for years. I cried after saying them, not out of shame, but out of freedom, because naming it meant I wasn't its prisoner anymore. In therapy, I started to discover what I had really been chasing. It wasn't pleasure. It was power, control, identity. I wanted to feel alive, wanted, seen. I realized I had tied my worth to fantasies because I didn't believe I was enough in real life. I believed that the only version of me that could be loved was the one that performed perfectly. The videos, the stories, the mental escapes. They were never about sex. They were about trying to run from myself. But no fantasy can hold you when the truth explodes. Now I sit with the pain. I face it, I journal, I cry, I show up. I stay when I want to escape. And every time I tell the truth, even if it's just to myself, take back a piece of who I was before the addiction took over. My husband still sleeps in the guest room. Some days he talks to me. Some days he doesn't. And I don't know what tomorrow will look like. But I do know that for the first time, I'm not hiding behind screens, filters, or lies. I'm here. Whole, wounded, but real. And that for me is where healing begins. And you? What are you feeding in the dark? What secret have you buried so deep that even you stopped acknowledging it? Is it a habit? A memory? A website you swear? Each time will be the last. A message you send hoping no one finds out. I know how it feels. I know the guilt that crawls in your chest when you smile in public and scream in silence. I know the mental gymnastics you do to justify, excuse, delay. It's not that bad. At least I'm not cheating. I can stop whenever I want, but you don't, because the silence gives it power. Because, as long as no one knows, it feels like it's not real, but it is, and it's growing. I learned painfully that the things we hide don't go away. They fester, they rot everything around them, until one day, they burst, and the explosion is worse than the confession would have been. The shame kept me in chains longer than the addiction. I was more afraid of judgment than of losing myself. But freedom, real freedom, it started the moment I stopped pretending, when I looked in the mirror and said, I need help. I wasn't healed in a day. I still struggle, but I'm not alone in the dark anymore. I'm surrounded by others who were brave enough to speak. And now I'm telling you, whatever you're facing, you're not the only one. You're not broken beyond repair, and you're not too far gone. But you do need to take the first step. And that step is honesty. With yourself, with someone safe. With God, stop lying to keep the image alive. Stop hiding behind strength that isn't real. There's more peace and truth than in any fantasy. I promise. And maybe this is your moment. Maybe this story wasn't an accident. Maybe today is your chance to break the silence before the silence breaks you. This is my story. It's not clean. It's not pretty. It's not easy to tell, but it's mine. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay while something inside me screams for help. I've carried this addiction in silence for years, and it's nearly destroyed everything I held dear. My marriage, my peace, my sense of worth. But now, even in the wreckage, I finally feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Honesty, maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you're fighting your own silent war, a secret habit, a dark desire, a cycle you swore you'd break but keep coming back. If that's you, comment here. Say something. Say anything. You're not alone. No one here will judge you. This isn't a place for perfect people. It's a space for broken people who want to get back on their feet. For those who are tired of the weight, the lies, the double life. Here, we turn pain into power. Here, your story matters. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. I'm still struggling. I still have bad days and setbacks. But I'm done hiding. I'm choosing light over shadows, truth over silence, healing over pretending. And now I ask you, how much longer are you going to hide? Isn't it time to come out? Isn't it time to finally breathe? Take off your mask, join our community, and never forget, your story can help others. Keep watching this video that's appearing on your screen.